I know that it's the day after Easter, and I have some videos I wanted to share last week, and I didn't get around to it, so I'll throw it in here even after Easter. I did some videos on why the evidence is for a Wednesday crucifixion, not a Friday crucifixion. We get that from Catholicism. It's just a traditionalism. But the Bible has more to say about the crucifixion than anything else in the Bible. So here's the videos, and go ahead and look at them. I believe that Christ did the Last Supper on a Tuesday. He was crucified on a Wednesday, put in the tomb by Wednesday afternoon before 6 o'clock, was there for 3 days and 3 nights, and then he arose, of course, on the first day of the week. So watch the videos if you're interested, and leave something in the comments. But I think it's interesting that we need to get away from man traditions and man ideologues and see what the Bible actually says. Hi, I'm doing one of the videos that fall into the genre of ones I've always wanted to do. I've been studying, the last week of Christ. I've heard some interesting things about it over the years, and I've been putting it together for myself because some things just didn't gel. And so I started looking into myself. And I've wanted to do one on the last week of Christ. And oddly enough, this year it falls before Easter. I really didn't plan on it. In my daily Bible studies I've been doing for family and friends, I actually was in the book of Mark, coming upon the last week of Christ's life in the book of Mark. And it's interesting because Mark is more like a shooting script. Kind of gives you just some of the nuts and bolts. He kind of goes really fast through it. He hits a few stories here and there, a few key points, a few key people. Then he gets to, of course, the last week, which is very important. We get a lot of information about that from the book of John. But in Mark, we get a little more detail, and I started using a lot of those details. So I started putting together the last week. And before I go through my little presentation on this computer, I wanted to show the last week. And this is how I've put it together. And it kind of tries to follow our Gregorian calendar with the Jewish calendar. What's difficult when you're trying to do this is to think that the day starts 6 hours before our day starts. So if I say tomorrow, you're thinking after midnight today. In the Jewish term, especially at the time of Jesus, you'd be talking after 6 p.m. today. So there's a different thing going on here. So when we're trying to figure out the days, I put both of them side by side. My struggle is I couldn't find a strong reason for a Friday crucifixion beyond tradition, beyond what the Catholic Church has taught. And some of the Protestants just pull that right over. But what does the Bible say about that? Was he indeed crucified on Friday, rose on Sunday? Now, we know that he rose on the first day of the week. That's very clear. Okay. But there's certain key points that didn't fit. And several times in my studies, I'll have Jesus say, on the third day, 3 days and 3 nights, just as Jonah was in the belly of the great fish, will be 3 days and 3 nights. Now, I've heard people argue back and forth, well, the Jews thought a day was a half a day or a part of a day, or they weren't very clear. My problem with that is you're not calling Jews vague. You're calling Jesus vague. You're calling Scripture vague. If Jesus says on the third day, 3 days and 3 nights. So how do you reconcile the two, or does it matter? I think it does matter, but I've been doing my own research on it, and I wanted to present it. And I think there are more touchstones for one view than the other. Like I said, no one has a Friday crucifixion except for Catholic tradition and Protestant tradition. And some people will leapfrog around and do a lot of vague speculations in that area. I tend to go with the Bible. I tend to take what the Bible says, and I believe everything I'm presenting will be clear from the Word. Let me show you. I have it up on here, but I always like to show a printout so you could take pictures if you wanted to, and have it for your own. That way you could use it as a reference. I'll go over this chart in a minute, But here's where I've tried to take, I did the 6 p.m., midnight, 6 a.m., noon kind of thing, how we do on how we put together our days. And so we have 6 p.m. noon, then we have midnight, 6 p.m. noon. This is just a little typo here, don't worry about that. 6 p.m. noon, you see how I'm doing, midnight, 6 a.m. noon, 6 p.m. midnight. I try to put the days there to correspond with how we view. And column 1. Column 2, I went Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, again from a Gregorian point of view, the way we know it. Over here, the Jews will go evening and morning. So there you see evening corresponds with 6 p.m., morning corresponds with 6 a.m., evening with 6 p.m., morning with 6 a.m. So that's the beginning of the days from a Jewish point of view. And again, this was established by Elohim, not by Moses. Genesis 1, in the beginning, the evening and morning, evening and morning, evening and morning. The Jews count the days from 6 p.m. to 6 p.m. or 6 p.m., 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. is the morning. 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. is considered evening. The evening is 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. when it's dark, and the morning is 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. So they have their morning goes from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. So that's evening is first, when it's dark, morning is second, evening and morning, evening and morning. In the fourth category, you'll have the days of the Jewish month over here. Nisan 10, then Nisan 11, Nisan 12, Nisan 13, Nisan 14, and I have another one that goes with this that I'll show you, and you can make copies of this if you want. And I put some scriptures next to it. I'll discuss all of those scriptures that correspond with things that happened on that day. Like we know the Passover was on the 14th. We know that unleavened bread was on the 15th. We know that first fruits was on the 17th, or actually it was the first day of the week after the week that had the Passover. So if you had Passover on Tuesday, your first fruits would be the following first day of the week. If your Passover was on Monday, your first fruits would be the first day of the week. So that one floated. But Passover was always the 14th of Nisan. The Feast of Unleavened Bread was always the 15th for 7 days. And these are known as the Feast of the Spring Feast. Here's number 2, and I'll bring that computer back up. It kind of went to sleep on me. Once again, same kind of thing. I'm going midnight, 6 a.m., noon, 6 p.m., midnight, 6 a.m., noon, 6 p.m. And then I put the days of the week that correspond. I have here I have a 2 and a 3 next to evening and morning. I'll explain that when I get to it in column 3. And then column 4 are scriptures that line up with things that happened on those days. Some people don't know that the same day that is first fruits, the 17th of Nisan, let me say this, the 17th of Nisan was also the day the ark landed on Ararat. If you go back to Genesis, when it talks about the ark landing, it had been floating for a year, but when it landed on a specific day. And that was called the 17th day of what they call the 7th month, which later became the 1st month in the time of Moses. So on the 17th day of Nisan, and again, that is a static day, like your birthday, like Christmas, it floats. So the 17th is not always the first day of the week, and that's going to come up as important in a minute. So take those charts, make some copies if necessary. I might do 2 videos. My son said that sometimes these get a little long and people don't like long videos. Okay, fine. I can break this into 2 parts. But to begin with, again, like I said, I put on the chart the Gregorian on the side, 6 p.m., 6 a.m. Again, the confusion that I've had with this is trying to think 2 ways at one time. Trying to think like, okay, I've got the Gregorian calendar, but I've also got the Hebrew calendar, which is 6 hours off. So that's why I try to put them side by side. You have 6 p.m., and you have this set up as Sunday, and there's the 10th of Nisan. So that would have been, so Sunday began for us at midnight. But the day, the 10th of Nisan, began 6 hours earlier. That's what I'm saying. So the 10th of Nisan got here 6 hours before our Sunday. And that happens every week. Every week you'll have what we call Sunday. They call the first day of the week, which begins 6 hours into our Saturday. Our Sabbath, their Sabbath is Friday, 6 p.m. to Saturday, 6 p.m. And then their first day of the week begins on 6 hours before our Sunday. Got to get all of that clear. So we're going to look at this, and I'll try to go back and forth. We're going to see that I started with 6 p.m., which I started on the 10th day of Nisan in 32 AD. And I'm going to show how this fits. There's certain key points that we need that I put in, and then I wanted to see if the other key points would fit. There's certain key points, like we know, let me see if I can get this to work. We know, for example, I've got some markings there, but we know that the Last Supper was on the 13th, because that was the day before he died on the 14th. So if you just look at this half of the screen, you'll see that it fits pretty close into, there's the 13th of Nisan is when we had Last Supper, and then he was killed on the 14th. Then he was killed that day, and then he was in the tomb before the 14th, because the 14th was the Passover. Remember, they could not have him. Now, this was not what they call the seventh. This is where we get confused, because we think, well, Sabbath is always Sabbaths. The Jews had more Sabbaths than we did. They had 7 more Sabbaths, if you understand the Leviticus 23, where they had first fruits, they had Passover, they had they had Day of Atonement, they had the Tabernacles, Festival of Booths. They had 7 other Sabbaths that they had to keep along with the 7th-day Sabbath. So when they say keeping the Sabbaths, they were keeping more Sabbaths than we normally keep. God wanted his Sabbaths revered in the Old Testament, not just that 7th day. So we see here, if I can keep this moving, that we have on the 14th of Nisan, we have the Sabbath. The 15th is unleavened bread. And I'm going to go over and show you all of this. But we know that Christ rose on the first day of the week. And he rose on the first day of the week after the Passover in 32 AD. So there are certain set points that we can put in. So I put the set points in. And then, of course, we know Mary got to the tomb, and she got there in the morning. Okay. We still see that she's still in that same day. The day doesn't change till 6 p.m. when we get, I didn't put an 18 here, but there should have been an 18 in that spot right there after the evening. Because there's nothing, this is just put in to give us extra. So to see what this is doing, let me get this to roll up. There are certain set points that are in there. We know that there was a triumphal entry. That Jesus did this. He came in, he's riding the colt, the foal of an ass, someone that has never been rode by men. Here's this man, anywhere from like 150 to 170. We think he's pretty average weight. The Bible says about him that there was nothing about him that stood out that you would love him. I mean, he wasn't exceptionally pretty, he wasn't exceptionally ugly, he wasn't exceptionally tall or exceptionally short. He wasn't exceptionally anything. He's pretty much the average man. So the average weight was probably 150-ish at that time. I'm going to go with that. But still, he's riding this thing going along, and also the people are putting down their clothes, and they're putting, that they can spare. They didn't go take off all their clothes, but put down their cloaks and stuff. They put down the palm trees and all of this, and this donkey, this little foal, is tripping all over, and here he's trying to make his way. And they're singing Hosanna, you know the story of the triumphal entry. So I'm trying to put in what days fit. I mean, if you're just going to go with Friday Crucifixion, then you just back it up, and there's very little to do but sip your coffee and move on. But I have my theory. I have my theory that there's more to this than meets the eye. So we get here again. I want to go over this. Let me see if I can get my computer again to work. All right. So again, going over this 6 p.m. in the evening on the 10th of Nisan is where I'm starting. And I'll show this whole thing. I'm probably going to start another video in a minute because, again, keeping them too long. but also the fact that I wanted to run over how I'm formatting this. Let me go through this so you kind of understand some key points. First of all, you've got, I backed this up and I had to put it all together. The key points are, of course, the triumphal entry. Mark is a good place, like I said, to do this, because Mark will tell you, for example, I was reading Mark 11 where it talks about the triumphal entry, and on Mark 11, number 12, it says, and in the morning. So he does his triumphal entry. He does this big, grand thing. And this is not a small thing to have Messiah come in on this day. In fact, I'm going to take a moment and mention a book that's very good on this called The Coming Prince by Sir Robert Anderson. It was written back, I think it was written in the 1800s or something. Very good book about the Daniel chapter 9. And it deals specifically with the scriptures that talk about from the establishment of the edict to rebuild the temple, to rebuild Jerusalem, to the coming of the prince will be a certain amount of days. This was the prophecy that Gabriel gave Daniel. Well, our friend, Mr. Anderson, and I wrote it down on here, it's on the bottom, he worked it out to where, the Jews would not just go 365. They had a 360 day calendar. And so it says here that Sir Robert Anderson has 69 weeks. Daniel starts at 445 BC, and it goes for 173,880 days, and it ends in 32 AD. Now, some people will give the exact dates, but they're giving Gregorian dates. I'm struggling with the acceptance of Gregorian calendar because we know that it's been off. We know that they've changed the calendars. The Catholic Church changed things over the years. So really that it's 2024 is a little bit of speculation, but we'll run with it. It's not that important. But for the Jews, like I said, I'll show this up, where Robert Anderson, that the 69 weeks would begin with King Artaxerxes, and it began in 445 BC and would go to 32 AD. So the Jews knew, I know we in Christians say, nobody knows the day and the hour. They were different. They were expected to look at Jesus, look at this gospel, look at our Bible with a little more precision than we are. And we actually should be more precise. But we aren't for some reason. We tend to rely on our concordances and our theologians and all these little books and that float around. And we always have a third party telling us what to think, when we should be going to the Word itself. That's where I've got here is this to me is Word itself. You're saying, well, you just read Robert Anderson. Yeah, but he only gave me that one fact. When I go to the bottom here, the only fact that is not from the Bible is that the Bible does not say that it was in 445 BC to 32 AD. Robert Anderson found that out. Exactly the 69 weeks were taken care of in that time frame, and that will stop the 69 weeks. So that's the only thing from here that I take from a third party. And I don't mind third parties if they're valid. I don't mind them giving me facts, but I do mind if they tell me what to think. So I'm going to stop here. I'm going to do this in a part 2. Then I'm going to look at my chart, and we're going to look at my theory on why I think a Wednesday crucifixion makes more sense with the Word. See you in a couple. I wanted to add this chart because this is the chart that I was using when I was talking about the 3 days and 3 nights. That I talked about how we have 6 p.m., midnight, 6 a.m., and we also have Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Here the Jews would have understood evening and morning as a day. And here we also have the 10th of Nisan, 11 and 12, and there are some scriptures to connect those. This is mostly from the book of Mark. And here we have the days 13, 14, and 15. You'll notice that when God told Moses that on the 14th day of Nisan to do Passover, but do unleavened bread on the 15th day of Nisan. So there we have Mark 12, 11, 20 through 15:1. All of that stuff happened in the evening of what we call Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. Then all day Wednesday, he went through the trial. Then he was crucified at 9 a.m. on Wednesday morning. the darkness over the face of the earth, at face of that area of the earth, at noon, and then him giving up the ghost at 3, and him in the tomb before 6 p.m., which will be the Passover. I put a 1 there and underlined it. That was the first evening. Then you'll see the second morning. Then you'll see the second evening on the 15th. Then we go over here to where I've got Friday. There's a second morning. That should have been a 3 next to evening. That's the third evening that he was in the tomb. He was in the tomb again, a third morning. I maintain that after 6 p.m. Friday, or after 6 p.m. Saturday, and before 6 a.m. Sunday, he resurrected. And he could have been resurrected anywhere, I would say, between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. When Mary got there in the tomb after 6 a.m. on Sunday, the first day of the week, she would not have said, she was not told, you just missed him. He could have been up for hours at that time. But everything falls into place for him to have been resurrected on first fruits, which was also the anniversary of Noah's Ark and landing. So here's my chart. Take a look at it. Thank you. I went over the format of what I put together here, and I'm showing how that I'm trying to reconcile our Gregorian calendar with the Jews and make this more fit, and really why I think there's more evidence for a Wednesday crucifixion than there is for a Friday. And I lean really heavily on Jesus saying 3 days and 3 nights on the third day. He didn't say on the second day or a day and a half later or 2 mornings, 1 evening kind of thing. Christ was very specific. I don't think we keep him as precise and specific as he was. I was listening to a pastor the other day on the TV, and it frustrates me that you let Jesus use one parable and everything's a parable. He uses one allegory of figurativism, then they say, well, everything's a figurativism. This one guy was saying that, well, there really isn't a hell, because Jesus was just saying that's a bad feeling that you have, or it's being in a bad place in this world. He might have been a Jehovah's Witnesses that I was listening to. But it's so easy to get us off as Christians with one thing, precision. When you look at the Garden of Eden, what was the problem with Eve? She wasn't precise. Adam wasn't precise. You were not. See, what the serpent did was get her off precision. Well, you can't touch it or eat it? Well, he didn't say you couldn't eat it. He said you couldn't touch it. Again, the precision was, unless you're going to lean over and bite with your mouth, you weren't supposed to have any dealings with it. But God was very precise with what would happen with that fruit and what would happen with that tree. He was very precise with the establishment of the tabernacle, how big, how tall, what it was going to be covered with, how it was going to be inlaid. He was very precise with the temple, how big, how tall, what kind of stones, how they'd be set up, where you would set it up, how you would face it, how you would create the courtyard and all this stuff. And when you look at Ezekiel 40 through 48, the precision again. So I think there's some precision here that we need to look at instead of just the speculation of, well, Friday crucifixion, big deal. It is a big deal. Is the Bible right or is the Bible wrong? And more importantly, is Jesus right or was Jesus vague? See, I'm not going to stand before him and say, I thought that you were vague. I think he was clear. I think he said 3 days and 3 nights. This goes over, and I believe, start it back up again, I believe that it will show what I'm going to do. So I did, again, our midnight, 6 a.m., noon, 6 p.m., how we think is as in the 21st century. Our days, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Then we get to the Jewish evening and morning, evening and morning, evening and morning. Then I worked backwards to put in the 10th of Nisan. Now, there's an interesting scripture in Exodus 12:3. Exodus 12:3 says that on the 10th day of the first month, you will take the lamb and separate it out. Separate the lamb, and the lamb will be separated until it is slaughtered on Passover, which would have been 4 days later. I mean, the math is there. It's very simple. In Exodus, they were told to take this lamb, and you'll take it in, and you prepare it. It's going to be a lamb without blemish, taken from the fold, and you'll have it, and you'll get it prepared, and it will become the Passover lamb on the 14th day of Nisan. So that sets up 4 days. So I'm saying that, and also the fact that, one thing I'll show down here, on the 17th of Nisan, which I think is another reason. The 17th of Nisan, the day the 17th again, was when Noah's Ark landed. Why would God not hit those two important days? The day of new birth, when the Ark landed and they opened the doors, and the Ark is done. Why wouldn't God hit those 2 days? Why would he not have Christ come in on the triumphal entry on the same day as they're picking the lamb for the Passover lamb? Why wouldn't he have Christ's resurrection on the same day, that is the 17th, which is the anniversary of Noah's Ark landing? Why would he miss those days? I think it would be pretty cool. I think he didn't miss those days. So let's look down this. We have the 10th of Nisan. We have the selection of the lamb that happens, and I'm going to put it in the morning. They probably didn't pick it at night. They probably got up early in the morning. You had all day to do it. Some of this, okay, you're going to get me. It's a little bit speculative, but hey, there's nothing on the other side but the Catholic Church says so, or the Protestants have always believed this. You have your own traditions, and you have your own ideas and speculations. You really don't have, other than, well, Jesus in the Bible was vague. I'm not going there. I can't go there. So we have the 10th of Nisan, the selection of the Passover lamb according to Exodus 12. Then you have the triumphal entry, and I'm going with Mark's gospel mostly on this. Then there was evening, and it says in the triumphal entry, when he came in, he's got all this hoopla. Yay, you're the Messiah. I mean, you're not just a king, you're the king coming. You think you couldn't have got a room? But he turns around with all of the people, with his disciples, and goes back to Bethany. This is like a 3 to 5 mile walk. You think he couldn't have got a room? No, he goes back to Bethany. Then he comes back in the morning, which is what we call Monday. Mark 11 says, in the morning, in the next morning. And that's when he did the cursing of the fig tree. He goes into the temple, cast out the money changers on this day. So, that happened there according to Mark. The other Gospels aren't as specifically on giving you days, but Mark is there. That happens here on Monday. So he does that, and then he goes back. Then we see on Mark 11:20, it says, in the morning. There's your second morning. So he goes in the morning, and so this is Tuesday. Now, Tuesday's a big day for Jesus. Everything that happens between 11:20 and 15:1 happens on Tuesday. He calls down, that's when he has the parable of the husbandmen, the ones that have the vineyard and kill the servants and kill the prophets, but then they kill the son. What do you think the father, the owner of the husbandmen, the owner of the vineyard is going to do? This is a parable that Jesus taught. He teaches that one. And like I've said in other videos, it's the only one that has no transformation, no teaching. You don't change. If the lost coin is found, the lost sheep is found, the prodigal son returns. Parables have a focal point going from one to the other. This one has no focal point. It is simply the husbandmen are wrong and they're going to get slaughtered, especially if they kill the son. In the story, they're like, if we kill the son, we'll get the inheritance. How? How did you think that you would get the inheritance by killing the son? So he tells this one, and this is one of several things he does against the Pharisees up here on the morning in Tuesday. Then he has the evening where he teaches some. He talks about in Matthew, we do have him talking about the comings, or what are the signs of your coming. So he does all of that talk about wars, rumors of wars, famines, pestilence. He does a lot of it. John will have a lot of discourse where he gives a lot of information. You'll have the word love more in the book of John. You'll have the more emotions in the book of John, which is really good. You'll get a lot more information about this time period in the book of John. But here, leaning mostly on Mark, he has this parable. He's got all his teachings. He has the Last Supper in the evening. Then comes in the night. He's got this prayer. I should have put that in there. He's praying, and they keep going to sleep. He keeps praying for another hour. They keep going to sleep. Then comes his rest in the night. It's not in the morning yet, because Peter, remember, Peter that denies him, and when the cock crows, that's in the morning. That's before the sun comes up. So we have this happening in the evening with various trials, and again, the denial by Peter, and of course all the others denied him. In the morning, and if you look at 15:1, it's in the morning. Now, Jesus' enemies had been up all night trying. They ran him back and forth from Caiaphas and Ananias to Herod, and they ran him back and forth trying to condemn him. They couldn't get witnesses to chide. Finally, they got him to agree that he was Messiah by him saying, "You said it." I mean, when they said, "Are you the Son of the Blessed One?" He goes, "You said it." It was an affirmation statement, not a "you said it, I didn't" kind of statement. I heard a history professor try to make it that way, but it's an affirmation statement. It's like if someone says, "It's a pretty day," and I said, "You said it." It's an affirmation statement. So here he goes to Pilate and has his trial, and then he's put on trial and taken around. This is when you had the releasing of the other prisoner instead of him. And then you have him being crucified. He gets on there on Wednesday. And Wednesday 9 a.m. he goes on the cross. It gets dark at Wednesday noon. And then at Wednesday 3 p.m. he calls out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And he gives up the ghost. The ghost doesn't leave until he says so. He's run the entire show from the triumphal entry to here and then after. He's running the show. He made them mad. He ticked them off. He turned over the money changers. He wouldn't let anyone enter the temple unless he said so. He was running the show. He spoke against the Pharisees and Sadducees and Herodians. He was really off the chain, making them angry, and they're going to crucify him. But he ran the whole thing. So here we have him. He even died at 3 p.m. at the same point. Tradition will say that they slaughter the lamb at 3 p.m. right before the Passover meal. This is where they would have had the Passover meal. They have their Last Supper early. So it's interesting how we tend to think that this was a Passover meal. I'll back up to something. It's not. It's the Last Supper. They were actually, it looks like the plan was to be in that room for 2 nights. I mean, think about it. They asked Jesus, the disciples asked Jesus, "Where do we go to get a place in preparation for the Passover?" So it's like, you better get a room early and maybe get there a day ahead of time. You don't want to get there on the 13th and look for an evening. I really honestly believe that dinner was not a Passover meal, although it had the aspects of it. The Passover meal was never done by them, by those disciples that I know of. Never. Maybe they had Passover and we don't know about it or something like this because they're good observant Jews. But it looks like to me the plan was for them to have the room for 2 nights. We're going to eat just a regular fellowship meal, which for them meals were fellowships. And then we're going to next night have the Passover. And then came all of this stuff with the trials and the murder and death and burial. And Joseph Arimathea puts him away, and all this happens before 6 p.m. on Wednesday. Now we have the 14th, which is 6 hours before our Thursday. Then we have the morning of Thursday. Then we have the evening starts, which is the unleavened bread starts on the 15th. And then they have their Sabbath on the 16th. 3 days and 3 nights. And then here comes the 17th of Nisan, and right on the money, right on the day that the ark landed. See, God, like I said, the 17th is a floating day. The 17th any other year could have been on, the day before or the day after, the first day, the second day, the third day. It's like your birthday. It's like Christmas. It falls on a different day. But this year, in 32 AD, I'm going to go with the 17th lands on the first day of the week. And I don't think God misses this. Now, I know that specific is not in the Bible, but there's more scriptural evidence for this, like I said, than there is for a Friday crucifixion. Like I said, all we've got is, and I haven't looked around in Eusebius and some of the church fathers, but what I have read is it doesn't go back that far to say that it's a Friday crucifixion. I know a lot of people that lean more into the Catholic tradition. I read there's some astrologers who say, well, that year, 32 AD, and that would have been, well, but again, because the Gregorian calendar and the Julian calendar are so misaligned, because there's so much speculation over what year we're even in, we cannot trust those. But can you trust God? Can you trust Jesus when he says 3 days and 3 nights? And my focal point of this whole thing is, Jesus said 3 days and 3 nights. And to me, this fits. Let me go back and show you something. I put this, you're probably wondering why. One morning, I have one evening. We have Christ dying. Here's the 14th. You have one evening, one morning, 2 evening, 2 morning, 3 evening, 3 morning. Now, Jesus, we have our tradition, which we might have to put aside. We have this so romantic thing of, Mary goes off on the first day of the week and there's Jesus, but he could have been risen for many hours. Nobody, the angel didn't say, well, shuck darns, man. Oh my goodness, you just missed him. He was here 10 minutes ago. Has anybody seen Jesus? Is he over by that tree? They didn't say that. They said he has risen. He has, past tense. When was he risen? Just now? Or could it have been hours ago? We have our idea again of the speculation of, with the centurions and with the ones who are watching the tomb. We have that happen at night. Well, I'm going to say, and again, when you say to one of us, night, morning, it's different. For someone in the Hebrew tradition, morning is 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Evening is 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. So if something happened at midnight, or if something happened at 10 o'clock, it's still in the evening. If it happened at 2 o'clock, it's still in the evening. So watch this. I'm going to go back up. You have Christ dying, and there's one evening. He was put in at 6 o'clock. So you have evening to 6 a.m. Then you have 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. That's one morning, one evening. You have a second evening on the 15th that began at 6 p.m. and it goes to 6 a.m. Then you have a second morning. Then on the 16th, and then you've got one morning, that's one morning, one evening, 2 mornings. That should say 3 right there. So the idea is, as he was there, that should have a 3 there instead of a 2. I messed up. So this was a regular evening on the. What I'm saying is that he was there a total morning, a total evening, a total morning, a total evening, a total morning, a total evening, and then a partial. So you're saying, well, you're speculating on that. Well, there's more evidence for this than there is for a Friday. But yeah, I kind of messed up on that one. But the idea is that he could have resurrected like at 2 o'clock in the morning, which was in that evening, but it wouldn't count because it wasn't a full evening. And you're saying, well, you're splitting hairs. Well, you're using speculation. So one of us, you weigh it out. One of us is saying God is vague and Jesus wasn't clear. One of us is not. So go ahead, think it over, think it through, puzzle it through. I have no problem with him getting resurrected at 2 o'clock in the morning before she got there, before Mary got there, and so he was there for a partial. I mean, if I said, he was there for 3 full days, and okay, I have no problem with him being resurrected within a partial day, but that's not a full daytime, nighttime time. And it fits the narrative real well. So, yeah, if he was there evening, morning, but he wasn't there a full 12 hours to count for which would have been a 4th evening. He maybe got resurrected at what we call midnight or 11 o'clock, and he's just hanging around in the garden like he normally does. And then here comes, and it does say that Mary got there in the morning. Now that's going to be a Jewish thing. If she'd have gotten there before 6, it wouldn't have been morning. It had been still in the evening, very, very late evening. We tend to think, well, if I get up, it's morning. You ever work graveyard? It doesn't work that way. And I think it's very precise. I think she got up and went off, got the spices she needed real quick, and then she arrived. She could have got up in that evening, to be clear, and got what she needed, and then got there in the morning after 6 a.m. Jesus could have been resurrected 6 to 12 hours, and that fits our romantic motif of it's dark, and then all of a sudden there's the earthquake, and all the centurions and people start screaming around, and the rock rolls uphill, which it did. It still all fits. And that's where I'm going with this, is there's no reason not to go with a Wednesday crucifixion. There's no reason to not see this as clear, except for my one little typo, that he was resurrected. He died, and there's one evening, one morning. There's 2 evenings, 2 mornings. That should have been 3 evenings and 3 mornings. And this is just a normal evening of the 17th. So, and so he did, and he was resurrected within that evening, which is not a part of these. He would have been on the 17th of Nisan. And I don't think God missed the 17th of Nisan. Why would he tell you? That's something we have to realize in the Old Testament. God doesn't waste words. He's very, very, very ergonomic. He's very precise, and he's very clear. I'm going to leave all of this for you to think about, ponder over. Like it, dislike it, that's okay. I'm going to sit around. Here we are I'm going to find out when the 17th of Nisan is this year. I'm going to back it up. I'm going to go through these days myself. Okay, this is about right now he would be, about right now he would do triumphal entry. Ooh, right about now he'd be casting out those money changers maybe. Ooh, right about now he would be in Gethsemane praying. Oh, right about now on a Wednesday he would be suffering for my sins. And on Thursday, right about now, he's lying on the tomb, and he's going to be there. And then sometime Saturday night, get up and go, he's risen. You don't have to wait till the morning when it's, it's all sunrise service and everybody's sipping coffee when the sun comes up. It's almost sun, S-U-N, worship instead of S-O-N, to tell you the truth. But I'm going to dodge a bullet on that one. I'm just saying, which one has the most scripture? And I'll leave that for you. Thank you.